Greetings, this is I, Tantisnare Van Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome once more. We're diving back into the desert cities and places on the world of Athas. Yes, it's time for more Dark Sun. If you're joining me, of course, live, hey everybody, wave from Twitch. But if you're joining me later on YouTube, hi YouTube, glad to have you here too. Remember to like, ring the bell, subscribe, all that kind of great things. Have any of you been to Balic? That's the question today, because that's where we're visiting. Balic, the city of sails. And that's my kind of question for the group. I like to ask these kind of things that are like, put it in the comments kind of things. Certainly, finding out who's experienced Dark Sun. But what do you think of Balic? Have you encountered Balic? That's my question. Now, as I've been talking about, I do use a number of books and online sources for this, and for Dark Sun, the books tend to just be better than the online sources. It's just an unfortunate thing that since the last update we really got on Dark Sun was 4th edition D&D, the 4th edition D&D books just still work better than online sources for kind of things. And of course, the campaign settings book is where I would recommend it most. It's the one I use for all my research in most of this time. I do check the online wikis for stuff that can link to the old 2nd edition things, but most of the updates here are really what you're looking for. Anyway, so if you want to look into it some more, I'm going to go over most of the details here, but there's a few things that I will not be going over that you might want to check out yourself. So if you do, I recommend kind of just hitting up this book yourself. Alright, let's talk about Balic, because Balic is not a terrible place. Now I'm gonna, if you can see my, I don't know if you can see my mouse here. You can't really. But down in the bottom of that map there, where it says Estuary of the Forked Tongue, that's where Balic is. And we talked about Tyr previously, which is over on the side, like Middle Mountains. So this is kind of the main settled region of Athas. Just keep this in mind. It is in the Tyr region, and Balic is in the Tyr region. So, yeah. Let's talk about Balic if you just looked at it. So it is the wealthiest of the 7 cities. That's an important part about Balic. It's a mercantile power. And it does technically have a democratic system. Technically. The thing about Balic is its democracy is as much as its dictator Androponus really wants. He's the true authority in this city-state. It's kind of like, it's not necessarily, I wouldn't call it a democracy in name only, but it's that there are countries in our world where they have democratically elected, effectively, dictators. I'm not going to name stuff right now. We'll keep it less than political, but historically also in that sense, there have been places where, hey, a dictator gets democratically elected and then is elected effectively for life, and then his cronies, more than anything, are his or her cronies are elected more into the, mostly him, into the important positions of power. That's Balic. So it doesn't mean you couldn't get people that are outside of Andropene's power, but Andropene really is the one in charge. Just there is a level of democracy in the city. Sort of. So there's about 24,000 people that live there, and there are some more in the nearby countryside that are under their watch, but we don't really talk about them much because most of them, they're sort of in the city yet not in the city. We'll talk about the people in this countryside nearby. The overall population, about half of it is human. Then we have dwarves, moles, elves, half-elves as a large percentage of the remaining population. And the city is actually known to have a small percentage populations of both minotaurs and half-giants. So most of Athas's main intelligent species are represented in Balic. When we talk about water, they do have 5 public water wells and an extensive subterranean cistern that supplies them. Most nobles have their own cisterns. The city-state does depend on the intermediate rainfalls in the month of the sun, depleting any, replenishing its water sources. Month of the sun's descending. Month of the sun descending. If there's a year's a little drier, the praetors will enforce water rationing. So there have been years where it's a little worse. They water ration just to make sure everything goes. Balic is a trade city, though, too. Its exports include grain, salt, olives, wine, livestock, leather, marble, and a small amount of copper. So they do have a little bit of metal even in there, too. Again, remember, metal's incredibly rare in Athas, so that's a very expensive thing. But they do export a lot. When it comes to defense, they don't really find threats from other city-states. Giants and desert raiders are drawn to their manors and fields, which are outside the city walls. I talked about there are some areas outside the city walls where there's some population, technically. But there are 5 legions of 1,000 soldiers, each garrisoned in the city and within the areas of the fields. Most able-bodied citizens are conscripted into the legion as young adults for 3 years of service. So, you know, again, this is excluding the slave population. There are a number of interesting inns and taverns to check out. I won't go into details about those, but if you want to see the book and look into those, that'll help for your adventuring parties. Now that we have some basics of Balic, let's talk about our introduction more than just at a glance. Let's start going into depths about it. Because, yes, it's a mercantile city-state on the estuaries of the Forked Tongue. Yes, dictator Andropenes, the Sorcerer King, is in charge. Andropenes has claimed to have been originally elected to his throne over 700 years ago. He was originally elected. Balic is affluent. I've talked about some of the major influences in Athas in previous videos, and the merchant houses, which are a major part that are universally kind of connected between multiple city-states, have incredible wealth and power, especially here in Balic. And the fortunes that are made here in Balic are shared amongst many, from Andropenes to the merchant families to even some below there. The business of Balic is business, for the most part. And Andropenes doesn't really interfere in the basic routine affairs of nobles and the merchant emporiums. He gets rich, he technically controls the city, that's about all he needs. So it does have some democratic traditions. Basically, Balic's nobles are seated in a chamber of partitions that create and maintain the code of laws. Its Templars must stand for elections of 10-year terms. Remember I talked about Templars, they're the servants of the Sorcerer Kings. Hey, they get elected. And that is the group that I've talked about, known as the Praetors. There are also professional guilds. Balic has a chapter of the Veiled Alliance, for that matter, that conduct their business by taking votes and electing officers. And even the dictator, in theory, is elected. In theory, you know. Again, much of what is democracy as we see it is little more than an illusion here in Balic. The office of dictator is held for life, and Andropenes has endured his position now for centuries. Public debate and discourse is allowed, but only up to a point. Criticism of the dictator, his Templars, is very harshly punished. And the partitions learned long ago, many generations ago, that they passed laws that meet within the dictator's approval. So you can see that there is this give and take, which is mostly taken by Andropenes. Now, Balic does have a rich cultural heritage, and a civic mythology dating back thousands of years. Expressions in a public appreciation for poetry and drama are very important to them. The mythology still lives in the form of powerful arcane vestiges. Andropenes and his Templars are masters of manipulation. The cultural heritage is evident in that there's a lot of theaters throughout the city-state. And they do run the gambit. You can find your ramshackled stage houses in the poorer quarters, where going to the general rabble, to the magnificent amphitheaters in the noble districts. So everybody in Balic enjoys a good show. And everybody can find a place they can go to enjoy that show. The most talented playwrights and orators can win Accium equal to that than the greatest gladiators, as long as they do steer clear of subjects that are, ire the dictator's Templars, that the dictator or their Templars might find offensive. Yeah. So, watch what you say, and then you'll be fine. I do have a bit of a cold, so sorry about that. Now, what kind of people are there? Well, if we're talking about Balic, basic language giant. Most people from Balic will have associated skills of athletics and streetwise. The other groups are there for basic characters you might look into. There are 3 groups. Of course, there's legionaries. You're the foot soldiers. You served with the city-state, and afterwards, did you just complete your enlistment, desert? Are you going into more stuff? Did you earn some rights, like for land owning and stuff like that? Get into officership? The partitions, you could be a member of a noble family, be part of a large estate, either in the city-state itself or in the lands outside of it. And maybe you've turned to adventuring as a new challenge, kind of growing bored of what's going on there. And of course, there's plenty of silt sailors. Because it's the Silt Sea right out there, that map I showed. And a lot of traveling across that. Fighting off giants, siltars, dust storms, in order to trade with other places. Let's talk about the power structures a little bit more in depth. So, we can start, of course, with Andropenes, because in an average Baltican, we'll see him as a necessary evil. They resign themselves to the fact that a dictator wields supreme power and isn't likely to surrender it. Andropenes routinely arranges for elections of Templars. He favors and directs the chambers of patricians to pass laws he drafts. From time to time, he indulges idealists and reformers, allowing corrupt nobles and unsatisfactory Templars to be indicted or voted out. However, he retains absolute control over the cities, legions, and brooks no defiance of his personal authority. So, here's the thing. You see some corruption, and you are a dreamer, and you will lead the people to, get rid of that corruption. Everybody's really like, you can get rid of that guy. Yeah, he's gone a little too far. A little too far for my taste. Keep things within the boundaries I have set for you. He's overstepped it enough that you can get rid of him. You can feel like you've done some good and helped out the people, got rid of people that are unsatisfactory, corrupt. Helped out the people. Is it really? It's more that he likes his status quo. So, those people are bucking the status quo. That's it. He has a status quo. He likes sticking with that. If you buck those trends and someone calls you out on it, you're probably out. That's his way of doing things to help maintain his power. And yes, he is incredibly powerful. They don't think they could get rid of him. So just dealing with him and letting him do his things, he tends to be pretty hands-off on the city. That's pretty good for a Sorcerer King. As long as you don't say anything, do anything to insult him, talk about a lot of certain things. So there's still a lot of problems in the city. But as long as you avoid all those things, you're probably okay. Probably. The patricians. They're the noble class. It's composed of the leading landowning families, and each family owns a slave-worked estate of grain fields, vineyards, olive groves, and pastures west of the city. Most prestigious public officers, such as military commanders and important Templar positions, can be filled only with candidates from the patrician class. So the families amass a great deal of influence and place their sons and daughters into public service. Theoretically again, the dictator governs with the consent of the Chamber of Patricians. Remember, that's a legislative body made up of the representatives of each family. But in practices, the patricians rarely challenge Andropenius. Charges of treason, justified or not, can ensure that the dictator needs to strip a patrician family of its lands and officers and redistribute them elsewhere. He can. So effectively, normally it's probably minor challenges to him of like, hey, come on now, man. Hey, come on, buddy. We can work on this a little bit better. Small challenges that, he might be like, fine, you've convinced me of this thing. I will allow it. That kind of stuff. But outright challenges and theoretically removing him. Oh! But yeah, technically the way it's built, it should be. It's just someone else holds all the power. Technically. Praetors, though. They are the Templars of Baltic. Hey, we talked about Templars. We're back on them. And they are, by popular vote, elected their offices for 10-year terms. Once they've won their positions, Andropenes invests with them magical power necessary for them to perform their duties. His minions carefully screen candidates, arrange voting districts and slates to produce the results that he desires. There is an occasion of an unwanted praetor is elected, despite what he has done, his arrangements. But, unfortunate accidents can befall such people as soon as they take office. To ensure only the people he chooses become praetors. Praetors who enter terms without re-election, who are elevated in anticipation of offices they might one day serve at the discretion of Andropopes. So basically, give me a second here to blow my nose because it's drinking. I'm a little sick. So yeah, basically, you either leave office or you get elevated. Depends on how well you will. The most important praetors in Baltic, the High Praetor, is no particular office, but stands high in the dictator's confidences. The High Praetors. So basically, there are some praetors above the others. They're just directly under our great lord here. All right. The merchant houses. Of course, since trade is the lifeblood of the city of sales, the merchant houses are very important. They fill the dictator's coffers with coin, and in doing so, keep in his good graces constantly. The streets surrounding the open market square, known as the Agora, are home to large emporiums from other city-states in the Tyr region, including House Vordon of Tyr, House Mackay of Ram, and House Stel of Uruk. The Agora is dominated by 3 major Balkan merchant houses and a dozen more smaller ones. So you will see that there are merchant houses directly out of the city here, of course, and a lot of smaller ones, but also you have this influence from other city-states. Everybody wants to come here to get their trade in. City-state is the city-state of trade. I'm going to mute again. I'm going to blow my nose. Now I think I got it all. So who's left? Well, people that have very little or no power. The commoners and the slaves of the city. Most of Balic's commoner are trade folks or artisans. They belong to the guilds that varying power. Some guilds are fairly strong in their influence and can force nobles and merchants to hear their demands. A great example of this is, of course, the Potter's Guild, which enforces very high standards and high prices on Baltic's distinct pottery, ensuring that the members earn a good wage from selling their pieces they produce. So you can see, if you're in the right guild, you can be set. That guild can actually have a lot of power because you are producing this very high quality pieces that are in demand mean a lot to the city. And of course, below the common citizen are the slaves of the city. There's about 40% of the city-state's population are slaves. Slaves enjoy basic protection under Balic's law. So they do have some protection under the law, but the problem is the praetors rarely enforce those laws, and only in the most egregious cases of cruelty will they step in. So theoretically, there are laws to protect and keep slaves in general good condition, to be treated decently, but it usually requires someone to go really extreme in the terrible ways they would treat you for the praetors to step in, unfortunately. Now let's take a look at Balic here, just a little bit, and explore the city. We're going to take a tour. So it lies near the eastern edge of the Balkan Peninsula, a range of arid hills between the arms of the estuary of the Forked Tongue. I showed that map earlier, if you want to go back and look at that, or find it online. There's a bunch of maps of the Tyr region. The slopes of the hills are mild and verdant by Athenian standards. Green fields, vineyards, olive groves, and progressively drier pastures extend about 30 miles west of the city-state's walls before giving way to the stony barrens and brown mountain peaks. And that's where we get those slave work noble estates along the peninsula that provide Balic its food supply. Now, of course, they are threatened by desert raiders and giants who lair in the land of the islands of the estuaries, and we've got then the military force protecting them as best they can. Most travelers bound for the city-state follow the Road of Legions, the major passage along the spine of the peninsula. Balic's walls cut off the tip of the peninsula, running about 2 miles between the arms of the different estuaries. Excuse me. I take a drink because I coughed. The city-state does sit on a natural harbor formed by high hills ringing a bay of silt. In age past, this would have been a seaport. But the water's gone. The oceans have dried up. There were plowed galleys and dromeds that once rocked gently in the moorings, but now there's a great fleet of silt skimmers that take shelter here. Scores of wheeled sailing vessels call Balic home, carrying their comments of the local market houses from Alturic and Leopolis all the way to distant Silk Archipelago or the shores of Ram or Draj. So they travel very far with material here. Within the walled harbor is the military shipyard known as the Arsenal, where is the pride of the dictator's fleet. A dozen silt dromods, light warships fitted with psionic-powered helms that levitate and can navigate silt of any depth. So basically, they're sonically levitating ships that it can use. Makes very powerful in comparison to your average silt skimmer. So now let's dive into the 5 districts of Balic, and of course it's Megalionon, the civic center, both literally and figuratively. And we'll finally turn towards our last image for the day, a map of Balic. Isn't this so pleasant? You can now see everything of it. And let's talk about these regions. So first off, we have the Arena District. The Arena District is where you come in first when you arrive in Balic, following the Road of Legions. It has the heavily guarded main entrance, the Great Gate here. This is an area of artisans, workshops, small stores. It cuts to the middle of the precinct and ends in a plaza surrounding the Criterion, the big arena here. If you venture north or south from the main road, the street grows more cluttered and people grow poorer. Now I can mention the Criterion here. It's standing under the white western bluffs of the Megalionarion. The Criterion is the pride of Balic. Its marble facade and awning towers over a nearby area, and great awnings tower over the nearby area. It's got gladiatory slaves live in secured barracks east of the arena. So it is the major gladiatorial arena. Remember, gladiators are a very prominent thing in Athas, and it's got its own little slave area. Now we go north of the Arena District to the Guilders Precinct. It stretches another commoner district that reaches the shores of the Silt. It's home to many artisans and workshops, including potters, leatherworkers, stoneworkers, weavers, limiters. The professions here are organized into large guilds, as I mentioned before. Crowded taverns and stage houses of the guilders' precinct are full of voices muttering against the dictator and wealthy partitions, and also spies that report what they hear to the praetors. So you have to be careful who you say, but there's plenty of people there that are kind of pissed off and might say some things. Now we turn to the harbor precinct. Between the Agoria and the estuary of the Forked Tongues is the Baltic's harbor precinct. It's cluttered with dwellings, workshops of common folk, but also home to several large shipyards, warehouses, and legion barracks. I mentioned the arsenal is in this region here. It also functions as a legion barrack and a fortress guarding the harbor against giants, other than having that fleet. And of course, the slave auction is here, too. The merchant precinct. This area is dominated by the emporiums and warehouses of the prevailing merchant houses. Some of these compounds are small cities within the city, hosting hundreds of mercantile agents and laborers. Of course, the Agoria is at the center of this. Well, sort of, the center of the trade here. At the eastern foot of the bluff adjoining the Megarium is the Agoria. It is the head marketplace, and location of its primary merchant emporiums. House Rees, House Tumblor, House Waver. I'm not going to go in depth about all three of those, but you can look them up there. And the only other thing to mention in the market precinct, of course, is the Elven Market. Because the Elven Market is barred from operating within Agoria. So elf vendors fill the streets and alleys nearby to that. Visitors that go to Agoria could face a gauntlet of elf peddlers and pickpockets before they reach the main bazaar. So, yeah, they barred elves, and so they just move it everywhere else. Now we turn to the Villa Precinct. This is where the Noble District is. It spreads over the slopes of the cypress-dotted hills south of the Arena District and the Megalonon. High above the haze of the silt that chokes the lower-lying precinct stands the palaces of the Patreons, surrounded by orchards and guarded barracks. A pleasant place. Mount Leranon is the only one I want to mention of an interesting place here, Brown Peak here, that rises thousands of feet above Baltic's eastern precincts. It shields the city from the dusty winds that blow up on the estuary most of the mornings. A handful of ruins lie on Olirant's slope, and stories persist that their vaults and crypts do hold long-lost treasures. And then finally we have the Megallinon. This is the physical and political center of Balic. It's a high, rocky hill overlooking the harbor. Andropenes rules from the White Palace, a majestic structure at the top of the hill. The Chalice of Patreons and Barrack of the First Legion sit farther down the slopes of here. There's also the Temple of Heroes. Near the Chamber of Patricians is basically shrine to the great figures of Balic's civic mythology. They don't worship these as gods, but they're ancient heroes that are seen as a collection of fables that illustrate Baltican's virtues, such as courage, dutifulness, resourcefulness, and cleverness. And of course, there's the Praetorium here, also to mention, because most of the civic business takes place there. A large building that houses the administration offices and quarters of the praetors. A strong, secure prison lies in the dungeons below the Templars' offices. But that is Balic, City of Sails. In a nutshell, I hope you enjoyed learning about Balic. It's an interesting city-state to talk about because it is... Again, it's the thing that when we talk about Athas, there's no great place to live in Athas. But certainly Tyr, Balic, they're probably better places to live. Yeah, Tyr is the free city. But it's got a lot of problems of its own. You know, a lot of vying for control. Yes, you're not going to have any kind of worrying about slavery there and things like that. But there's plenty of issues and just the lack of resources. And then you go to Balic where, yeah, you can strike it rich. You could get involved with merchant houses, involved with guilds, things like that. But there are people that are in terrible shape, and certainly their ruler is technically absolute, even though they've got a pseudo-democratic system. Greetings, we're talking about Dark Sun. It's a weird juxtaposition that we're probably going to go deeper into many of these cities, and they're honestly probably going to, in a way, get worse. but I can't guarantee that because it's how you look at things. There's different ways to look at the various city-states of Athas in the Dark Sun world. And none of them are great, but some of them are more livable than others. And again, it's this face the horrible desert where you have raiders, monsters, giants, all kinds of things that just want to end you at every drop of the hat. And you don't have the protection of these great walls and these cities. And resources, too. This is a place where you can find food and water. It's tough to live on Athas. And you got to make your choice. I talked about this in my previous videos, but certainly Balic shows that juxtaposition a lot more than a lot of places. There's a choice to live in this city. To live under this guise of democracy. Live under the thumb of merchants and a dictator. Or you could just face those deserts outside. And still worse, always be enslaved. That'll be it for this video today. I hope you enjoyed learning about this. And check out other tabletop-related stuff live on Twitch. It's Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Saturdays are backup days where I talk about topics like this and more. If you want to see my social medias, Discord, Twitter, link down below. Remember, check out both the YouTube and Twitch to give support. I do other stuff, live play of Pathfinder 1st Edition, Crimson Queen, Wednesdays at 9 p.m. EST. Check that out. And Discussing Tabletop discussion show, news of the week, deeper discussion topics, more, Saturdays at 6 p.m. I'll give my shout-outs. I thank you all for being here. And until the next time I do one of these videos, talk about this more, I bid all of you out there a deep and wonderful farewell.